friends, I'm Pastor Kelly, and this is part of our year-long Bible study based on Brian McLaren's book, We Make the Road by Walking. I know we've had a huge gap. I didn't post any updates during Lent, but if you did not get a chance to read some of those chapters in the book, I highly recommend it. They're really amazing. But now we're back at it. We're in chapter 34 today, and so if you haven't had a chance, read chapter 34 in the book and read John chapter 20 in the Bible. John chapter 20 is one account of the resurrection, but if you have time, check out the resurrection stories in Matthew, Mark, and Luke as well. You'll notice that they each highlight some different things that happened. Here's what we know based on all four Gospels together. Jesus died on Friday, and they buried his body in a cave near where he was crucified and put a big stone over it. No one was allowed to touch the body once it got dark on that Friday because that's when Sabbath began. And folks had to get home by the time it was dark too because they couldn't walk. So what that meant is after Jesus died, they didn't have enough time to totally prepare the body for burial. So first thing Sunday morning, as soon as it's light enough outside to see, Mary, the mother of Jesus, Mary, Jesus' aunt, Mary Magdalene, Jesus' disciple, Joanna, Susanna, and a few other women who were either friends of the disciples or friends of Mary, all go together to the tomb on that Sunday morning to finish out the burial rites that they should have done on the Friday before. And then when they get there, they notice that the stone has been removed from the tomb, Jesus' body is gone, an angel is talking to them, and everything is very, very confusing. In John, Jesus stays and talks to Mary Magdalene in the garden. The women, especially Mary Magdalene, are the first to believe that Jesus is really risen from the dead. They go and tell the disciples, a couple disciples even look in the tomb, and they just don't believe it. They don't believe it until Jesus comes back later. Jesus walks on the road to Emmaus with a couple of people, and then he shows up in a locked room and talks to the disciples. Thomas is a little bit curious about how this actually would work. Like, how does a resurrection of a body actually happen? And sometimes we've criticized Thomas for this curiosity. But haven't we all been curious? Like, when Jesus came back, did he look more like a ghost? Was he glowing? How come they couldn't recognize him? Where exactly was his body for those 36 hours? What did he do during that time? We've all had these curiosities. It doesn't mean that we don't believe in Jesus or the resurrection of the dead. It just means that what God is able to do is way beyond our imagination. Chapter 34 in the book talks about something called fellowship. Even though the disciples have been following Jesus for 3 years, now they're starting to understand that they have to be a community together, even though Jesus won't physically be present with them. Brian calls this fellowship something really interesting. He says, fellowship is a kind of belonging that is not based on status, achievement, or gender, but instead is based on a deep belief that everyone matters, everyone is welcomed, and everyone is loved. No conditions, no exceptions. Theoretically, all of our churches have that kind of welcoming philosophy. Doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, rich, poor, unemployed, criminal, kid, victim, whoever you are, you should have a place in our church. But all too often we do little things that make it hard for people to come in. We don't mean to, but we make it really hard for folks in wheelchairs to get around in our buildings. Or we say that only certain people can come up and take communion. Or we don't print the prayers in the bulletins. The really good Christians, they already know the prayers in their head. At Christ the King and Living Hope, we're trying to break down those barriers so that more and more people can feel included. But I'd love to hear from you. What else can we be doing as a church to make sure that we're honoring true fellowship between everyone? What's an opportunity that you've had in your life where you felt truly welcomed and included in a really diverse group of people? I'd love to hear your stories. Put them in the comments. Thanks.